All right. We're sitting here this morning again with Weldon Reed. We made an abortive attempt, but the cameraman screwed up a while ago. Weldon is a local Cleburneite who grew up here, evidently committed some things that we're not going to talk about too great detail, except that he went ahead and recorded them all and has confessed publicly. Weldon, how did you happen to get started writing? Tell us about your background and where you got started and how you ended up here.
Well, when I graduated from Old Cleburne High in 1959, my major was chemistry. I liked science. My freshman year at Abilene Christian College, though, the chemistry lab and me did not get along well at all. I kept dropping hydrosulfuric acid on my hands, watching it eat down to the white of the bone, picking up heated test tubes, and so I changed my major to history. Then when I was attending UTA, I took some aptitude tests, and the counselor said, "Boy, Reed, you score real high in English and history. Why don't you major in one of those?" And I said, "Well, what will I do if I major in English?" He said, "Well, you'd be an English teacher." I said, "What? That's the most detested profession on the face of the earth." And he said, "Well, if you still like science," which I did and still do, he said, "you could major in technical writing, maybe write articles and what have you, and manuals for chemical companies or something." And I said, "Okay." So I changed my major to English. Now I'm attending University of North Texas. And 6 weeks before I graduated in 1963, I'm still looking for jobs. And the last interview I had was with a gentleman from Health, Education, Welfare, and he said, "Reed, English major, make A's, speech, made A's, you're the perfect man for the job." I said, "What's the job?" And he said, "Well, we've got a national epidemic about to break out, and we want to nip it in the bud. And so we want to send people out to all the four corners of the United States. We prepared a slideshow and a script. All you got to do is memorize the script and present it and accompaniment to this slideshow, and you can handle that." And I said, "What is the national epidemic?" And he said, "Venereal disease." And I'm picturing, Jim, in my mind's eye, the slideshow that would accompany that script. And I said, You want me to become a national authority on VD? And he said, "Yes." And I said, "No," and walked out. And I told that story the next day to a teacher that I had there at North Texas, Dr. William Belcher, dear man, wonderful teacher. And he said, "Weldon, you're still looking for a job?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Listen, we have one master's fellowship left. Why don't you apply for it? I'll recommend you." Now, Jim, I'm just an old Cleburne boy. I didn't know what a master's fellowship was. What's a master's fellowship? He said, "Well, it's a graduate grant. We'll pay your tuition, we'll provide your books, and you'll get a master's degree. We'll ask you to teach 2 freshman English classes for us. We'll pay you $1,000 a class." And I said, "Well, what do I do with a master's degree in English?" And he said, "Well, you teach English in college." I said, "All right, let me see now. What are my choices? National authority on VD or teach college English?" And
Pretty straightforward decision.
Pretty simple choice there. And so I got my master's degree in a year and a half. And then Dr. Belcher said, "Weldon, TCU is offering a doctoral fellowship 3-year grant." Now, this time I knew what a fellowship was. He said, "Won't you apply for it? I'll recommend you." So I did and received the 3-year grant. Worked on my doctorate there at TCU for 3 years, completed my residency, did not pass what we call the comprehensives, 5 days of testing over any and all of world literature. And Dr. Carter, the chairman at that time, called me in to tell me that I had not passed that second time I took the test. And he said, "Weldon, the committee did not quite feel you were up to PhD timber." And that hurt, because I had never failed at anything before. But I said, "You know what, Dr. Carter, master's degree and 3 years doctoral work beyond, for an old Cleburne boy, I've done pretty good."
That sounds pretty
good. I started teaching full-time at Tarrant County College South Campus, taught there for 37 years. Retired 8 years ago, been teaching part-time ever since at TCC Southeast Campus in Arlington, and for also 8 years for Hill College here at the Cleburne campus when I moved back here 8 years ago. 3 years ago, I started writing articles for the Cleburne Times Review. I'd read an article by a friend of mine while I was lying in a hospital bed up here at Walls, and saw this article and wasn't all that impressed. I thought it'd be more entertaining than that. I said, well, shoot, I can write something I think is a little better than that. And so I called Dale Gosser down at the paper, and he said, well, send me a couple of them. So I sent him my first one here that I've compiled in the book, Eating Rooster's Eggs in Order to Be Able to Fly, and another one, I think the Cotton Patch Experience at the age of 6. And he liked them and said, all right, you can write bi-weekly articles for us. And I've been doing that now for 3 years. And I've written about 84 now. And the first 40 I compiled into this marvelous book, Tales of Old Texas, or The Adventures of Bullfrog.
And now, who is Bullfrog?
That's a nickname my Uncle O.B. hung on me when I was about 3 or 4 years old when we first moved to Cleburne. Not sure why. It could be that I have a big mouth like a frog, as I will readily assent to. I do like to talk. Or it could be because I have a long tongue like a frog's. How many people do you know who can touch the tip of their nose with the end of their tongue?
Yes.
I can do that. I don't demonstrate it in public. It's rather unsightly. Or, which is probably closer to the truth, I think he thought that my brain size was probably on the level with
Well,
the
we'll
frog.
just, but we'll say that this is a story, very successful stories of a bullfrog who was written, and it's written by Weldon Reed, a.k.a. Bullfrog. So,
You bet.
well, Weldon, I think you were going to share one of these stories with us this morning. What story were we willing to?
I selected one of my favorites, a jailbird at age 12.
Oh, my goodness.
It was summer and started off as a typical day. I'm riding, pedaling like mad down Sabine Street on my bicycle. Sabine was graveled at the time. I'm just leaving, spurts of dirt, dust behind me. And suddenly, my front wheel just locked up. Now, the bicycle stopped, but my body did not, Jim. I hurtled over the handlebars, landing on my chin, chest, knees, hands. I get up, skin, bruised, bleeding, pick up my bicycle, and that front wheel just will not turn. Something's happened. So I drag it back to the house, turn it upside down on the handlebars and seat, take off the front wheel, and lo and behold, the left wheel bearing had just fused solid. I guess I was pedaling so fast, superhuman speed,
superpower.
burnt that sucker up. So I go in the house, change T-shirts, and I tell Mom, I'm walking down the Welders Knoxville, I have to get a new wheel bearing. I had about $1.50 in my pocket. I didn't know what they cost, but surely it wouldn't cost that much. So I took off walking down there. I guess downtown was about 3 miles from the north end of Sabine where I lived. And, back then, you're a kid, you either rode your bike if you had one, or if you didn't have one, you walked. We only had one car, and I'm not going to drive it at 12, I don't think. I didn't try that yet. And so I walked down to Western Auto, and I just strolled in the front door, and I see the bicycles hanging in the back corner, and there's all the little bins that have all different parts. And I find the wheel bearing bin, and I look, and I've got the wheel bearing number off my broken one. And I find the right number, and 35 cents. Now, again, I've got the $1.50 in my pocket. But, Jim, I didn't really see any sense in just throwing money away. So I glance around. There's one old fellow behind the counter at the cash register, and he's not looking. So I surreptitiously slipped it in my front pocket, and I just nonchalantly strolled to the front door, opened the doorknobs, take one step out. And I guess that's sort of according to the law. If you step out, then you've stolen. Anyway, hand grabs me on the shoulder, get back in here, kid. And this gentleman, he was looking, sneaky outfit. And he drags me behind the counter, holding a death grip on my wrist, dials the phone with one finger, calls the police.
Oh, no.
He's going to call the police in because of a theft of a 35-cent wheel bearing. Offered to pay him, got the money. He said, nope, we're going to teach you a lesson, boy. Police car pulls up behind the alley. Biggest cop in Cleburne walks in, 6'5" or 6. I called him Goliath. Grabs me by that same wrist, drags me to the squad car, opens the back door, pushes me in behind the wire mesh like I'm a hardened criminal, John Dillinger or something. We drive the 2 blocks down to the jailhouse. He walks me inside, down this row of jail cells, puts me in the first cell, slams the door closed, and walks out. Now, looking back years later from a mature perspective, yes, I can see this was a scare tactic they were using. And it was semi-working, but there was a catch. I was a brazen little booger. I had already read Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So I had sat at the feet of 3 master liars.
They didn't know who they were dealing with, did they?
That's it. And but anyway, I'm kind of sweating here, a little nervous on this. I'd never been inside of jail before, never been caught before. Anyway, about half hour later, I guess, the policeman comes back, gets the death grip on my wrist again, drags me 2 blocks up to the courthouse, up to the 3rd floor, and parades me into the juvenile officer's office. I know his name, but I dare not tell it. Some of his family's still alive, might sue me, but I will never forget his name. And he reads me the riot act. You would have sworn that I had broken into Fort Knox or something. I kept thinking, mister, we're talking about a 35-cent wheel bearing here. Just, wrap my knuckles or what have you, chew me out good and send me home. But anyway, he asked me what my name is. Well, I lied to him. I'm not going to tell him my real name. He's going to have to kind of work for this. And where do you live? Well, I live in Illinois. What are you doing down here? Well, I'm visiting aunt and uncle. And he said, what's her name? I said, well, they're a distant aunt and uncle. I don't remember their names, but if you were to turn me loose, I'm sure I could find their house. And he said, well, now, son, I can't do that. But he said, I would be willing to drive you to their house. I've got to talk to them about what you've done here. And when he said that, a little light bulb, Jim, went off in my little bitty brain. Aha, I know who my distant aunt and uncle are going to be. There was an elderly couple that lived on Sabine, about 4 houses up from where we lived. Name of the Gillespies. Elderly couple. He was deafer than a doorknob. Okay, had a hearing aid, never worked. Battery never was any good, so he couldn't hear. His wife, meanwhile, had the original Coke bottle glasses about that thick. She was blinder than a bat. And I figure if I can get him to the Gillespies' house, that's my aunt and uncle. When he knocks on the door, he's probably going to still have a death grip on my wrist, but in order to communicate with either one that came to the door, he's going to have both hands to get the sign language going here or something. So I'm feeling pretty smug. I'm going to get out of this scot-free. All right, so he walks me downstairs out to his car, and I think, well, hey, I can get away here. Because when he opens that passenger door and seats me in the seat there, and he walks, boom, I'm out that door, and I know all the alleyways, backways in downtown Cleburne. I'm gone.
You're in the briar patch.
I'm in the clear. Well, evidently the juvenile officer had that pulled on him before, because he walks me around to the driver's side, opens that door, shoves me underneath the steering wheel and over the passenger seat, and continues a death grip on my left wrist. All right, and his car, dadgummit, is a automatic shift. He puts it in drive, and off we go. And I told him, I said, well, I remember an overpass over some railroad tracks. And he said, oh, I know, that's got to be Boone Street. I know where that is. So he starts heading north there from the courthouse. And I said, okay, Weldon, this is looking good. I'm going to get away with this. And we drop down the overpass, and Sabine is the first street there on the right. We turn the corner there at this junkyard. That was my Uncle Ob's junkyard, the one who nicknamed me Bullfrog. And I scoot down the seat to be sure Uncle Ob or my cousins or aunt don't see me. And 2 houses down, there's the Gillespies' house. And they lived in one of those old shotgun houses, the old railroad car, dining car, turned into a house. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe he'll come around. He pulls me underneath the steering wheel. I guess he had learned some things, right?
He must have.
Okay.
You weren't the first felon he had dealt with.
Yes. Probably some members of my little group that I ran around with. And so he knocks on the front door with his left hand, holds onto my right wrist, and I said, okay, I'm going to get away as soon as whoever comes to the door. My mother answered the door. She was visiting the Gillespies. Jim, I've tried to repress from my memory what happened next. Mother usually, when she spanked me, used the back of her hairbrush, which never really, threatened me or hurt me that badly. But this time when she marched me home, she went in Daddy's closet, got his black leather strap that the barbers used to sharpen, and then she whaled the dickens out of me, which was bad enough. But when Daddy got home, we really won't get into that. He killed me. This is my ghost sitting here today. That's just one of the typical stories in that book.
Well, I appreciate it, and I suspect we have a lot of people that need to come down and find out about this horrendous crime spree that went on here in Cleburne, Texas, back 60 years ago. Weldon, I think it's a delightful story, and I appreciate you coming down. I'm looking forward to having everybody here April the 13th. Y'all need to come down and get to visit with Weldon again, He's
You bet.
got
Hope to see
he's
some
got
old friends.
he's got 40 stories in the book, but I suspect there's at least 140 more that he hadn't told that he might. Weldon's a very reticent and shy guy, but if prompted properly, he will unload and talk to you. So
From time to time.
from time to time. So come on down and let's all have a good time and visit.
Thank you, Jim. Enjoyed it.
We appreciate it.